Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 3 Legacies Recovery Recording podcast. I'm your host, Paul. Today is Wednesday, November 5th, 2025, and this is episode 79. I want to thank all the support we've been getting. You can reach us at recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. That's our email address. Please feel free to send us any talks that you may like to have on, possibly posts on the channel. Any kind of suggestions that you may have for the channel, for topics or different speakers or different guests. Again, thanks all for all the support. We can also reach us. You can find us we have a private Facebook page, which is 3 Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast. Get on there and send us a request. We'd love to add you to the page. We always put upcoming events that are going to be coming down the path. You can find us on Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can, let's see, I think we have like 40 something episodes on some of those. I need to, I need to update that. I've been meaning to get on there and update. So you can, Podomatic, there's several other major platforms that you can find us on. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up for the rest of the month. This upcoming Sunday, which is November 9th, we have Jerry P. and Stephen T. We're continuing our tradition series, and we're going to be doing tradition 4. And then a week from today, next Wednesday, we have KDP coming back on the show. We've been doing a journey through the big book with KDP, and we're going to finish it up. Our scheduling has been crazy. She's been super busy. I've been super busy, and we've been finding time over the last few months to wrap it up. And it's been an awesome experience having her on here. She's such a gift. And we're going to be doing step 12. So that's going to be next Wednesday, which is the 12th. And so lots of cool stuff coming up. And super excited about tonight's guest. I had met this individual a few years back in a men's retreat that he did with Mike A. It was the Step Brothers men's retreat. It was a couple years, 2 or 3 years ago. And it's Sheldon F. from Las Vegas. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Paul. How are you? Thank you so much for the invite to come and spend an hour or so with you this evening.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Doing really good. God has really blessed me with a great life. I'm sober and happy and somewhat sane. Hopefully not too sane, but somewhat.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Are you in Las Vegas currently? You at home right now?
I am. I'm at home right now, and I'm blessed to be able to do some traveling for the end of the year. I'll be home for another week or so, and then I'm going to be gone till the beginning of January. So.
Wow, nice. You got any speaking coming up during that?
I'm going to Colombia,
wow.
Medellin, Colombia this weekend for a workshop with Amy Swain Duncan. Her and I are going to do a big book weekend.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Nice.
Yeah, a bunch of expats in Colombia. That'll be fun.
Yeah, nice, dude. I love Amy, man. We had her on here probably a month and a half or a month or so ago. Yeah, she's freaking awesome. I've met her a couple of times. I'm in Nashville, in the Nashville area, and she just lives like an hour or two away. So it's been cool. I've seen her at a couple of workshops around here too. I was funny.
Yeah, she's fabulous.
Yeah, it's funny because I was wondering earlier that I have an idea of. I was thinking earlier about some possible podcast episodes or stuff for next year, and I was thinking it would be cool to get a bunch of people, like just different people, to collab on the same episode. And it's funny because what came up was I was thinking, I wonder what Sheldon and Amy would be like. So that's cool. That's going to happen this weekend.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Yeah, nice. Are they recording it?
I don't know. They asked me to go. I show up. I'm not sure about how the event's going to go or how many people or if they're going to record it. I'm just excited to go hang out with Amy and some friends in Columbia.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I tell you, for the listeners, I'd called Sheldon. Like I said earlier, I'd met Sheldon at a men's retreat a couple years back. Him and Mike A did it, and I remember walking away from that retreat. And a fellow member, one of my home group members, he came to me and he was like, "Man, we should get Sheldon to come into town and do a 6 and 7 workshop, right? Because me and him are on a part of the workshop committee we have for our district." And he was like, "We should get Sheldon because we remember walking away from the weekend and all the cool little nugs that you had for 6 and 7." So then when I called and me and you'd spoke a few months ago to set this date. And I talked to you about it. You was like, I said, what kind of topic do you like talking about? What do you prefer? And you said 6 and 7. So here we are, man. Let's talk about what about 6 and 7? Why 6 and 7?
I tell you, I had an experience. I was maybe 2 or 3 years sober at the time, where I was doing AA to the best of my ability. I was a good home group member. I had a commitment. I was sponsoring a couple of guys. I'd gone through my inventory with my sponsor. I was making amends. I was doing AA. If you were to watch me, you would go, "That guy's doing AA." But what happened in my life is that I was privately going crazy. Um, it seemed like I'd go to work and I'd be at work for a while, and my boss would say something or something would happen, and I would get uptight at work, and all of a sudden I hate my damn job and I hate this, and I explode and I say the wrong thing to an employee or a coworker or the boss or a customer, and I'm calling my sponsor and I'm telling him what's happened, and he sends me to go. We do a little inventory and he sends me to make amends, and it gets to the point, Paul, where I'm going to my boss so regularly to make amends for these outbursts, 5, 6 times a year, that I'd gotten in this habit of buying him a cup of coffee. I'd go to Starbucks, right, and bring him a latte to a pub. And
Yeah.
and as I'm having an outburst,
Mm.
as I quit yelling and I'm getting ready to walk out of his office, he yells at me, "Sugar-free latte, please." Like like I'm the I do it again guy. It's the same thing with my marriage at the
Oh
time. It's
man.
the same thing in my home group. I'm the I do it again guy.
Mm.
One day in particular, I don't have a friendly direction. I mean, I feel like in Bill's story where he says quicksand stretched about him in all directions, right? I mean, I'm having problems in my marriage, I'm having problems at work, problems with my friends, problems in my home group. And I go to my sponsor's house and I am distraught,
Mm.
right? And the old story, right? If you have a good idea, call your sponsor. If you have a great idea, go and see him. Well, it's the same thing. If you have a bad day, call your sponsor. If you're ready to blow the world up, go see him. So I go see him,
Mm.
and I knock on his door, and he opens the door, and he takes a look at me, and I never forget what he said. He goes, "Oh my God, I know that look. That's the Sheldon can't manage his own life look."
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
And we go inside, and I'm ready for the 60 to 63. I'm the actor that wants to run the whole show. If only people would do as I wished. That whole resting satisfaction. I'm ready for that speech. But what he gave me was something different. He said to me, he said, "Sheldon, I think the problem you're having is a step 6 and 7 problem."
Mm.
And I was a little indignant. I said, "What are you talking about? I'm paying my 9 step, for God's sakes. I'm doing my best to live in 10 and 11. I'm doing step 12. I'm done with 6 and 7." And he thought that was funny. And and what he said next was the key. What he said the story of his physical sobriety, whether or not he drinks again, is the story of how effectively he works step 1 in his life. But the story of his serenity, of his happiness, of his joy of living, is how well he's willing to apply 6 and 7 in his life on a daily basis. And it blew my mind. And I have come to learn that in fact is true for me. That the days that I can really apply 6 and 7 in my life are the days that I have a good reaction to living.
Nice, nice. I can definitely relate. For me, it was probably about it lasted until I started noticing between 3 and 4 years. It was like something was not adding up, and then
Mm.
but within the next couple years, at that point, um, it was the same thing. It was almost like a second surrender I ran into. So I like how you said this is several years into it. I often tell people um, that I'm working with, like a lot of times in the beginning, when you first start your first or couple sets through the steps for the first few years is really almost just getting someone's feet moving, right? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Clancy, may rest in peace. He was my original grant sponsor. I've only ever had two sponsors, and he sponsored my first sponsor, and then he also sponsored my second sponsor. And so he's had a big influence in my life. And one of the things that he used to say was that, the steps are something that we do to distract us until God can have an effect on our lives.
Nice. That's so true. So true.
So here's what happens that I noticed with me, and then obviously as a student and a sometimes teacher, I have noticed in AA is that I come into the steps and my life's a mess, and if I'm at that place where I'm willing to do some work, right, and I want to get sober, and I write an inventory, and I get through my fifth step. And at the end of my fifth step, there's a conversation. It may sound familiar to you that goes something like this. Well, gosh, Sheldon, we've done all this inventory and we've noticed a few things about you. You've written them down here where you've said, where were you being selfish? And it seems like you're pretty selfish. And where were you being dishonest? And boy, there's lots of dishonesty there of you writing narratives and creating stories and not knowing the whole truth of the situation and making up the rest. And you're not really honest, and you're self-seeking. You take actions to try and control and manipulate situations, and you pretend you're a people pleaser, but nobody's pleased, so that's not it. You're a manipulator, and my God, man, you're afraid, right? And we come up with this picture of ourselves, these defects of character, and you can go online and you can Google a list of character defects, and you can come up with a hundred different names, but they all really come down to selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking behavior that is driven by self-centered fear. That's really what every character defect is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So after this inventory, my sponsor says to me, Sheldon, are you willing now to have God take these away, every one? So he asked me the step six question, right? That's the question of step six is, Sheldon, you can see what's causing the problems in your life. Are you willing to have God take that from you? Well, my God, I just did this inventory. I've cried snot bubbles while I wrote it. I've been embarrassed and uncomfortable while I've shared it. You bet I'm willing to have God take it away. Well, then great. Step six is done. Say the prayer. God, I humbly ask you to, blah, blah, blah. And then it feels like I'm done with that, right? Because I'm not of the mindset to want to keep any of these character defects. I know they're broken. I know they're causing me problems. So I think intuitively that I'm ready to have God take them. So then I go on with the amends. The problem is for me that driving home from my sponsors, having just done my inventory, prepared to do the chill for an hour in the 7 step prayer, right? Cured of everything that's wrong with me. There's a guy in front of me driving too goddamn slow. And you know what? If this idiot would just get out of the way, and
Yeah.
then a lunatic goes past me too fast, and the light takes too long, and I want to kill that guy, and I want to sleep with her, and my head is just it's on me again. And so what happens is I'm willing to have God take away the defects of character that are apparent from my past behavior, but I'm not necessarily willing to have God take away the defects of character from the behavior that is yet to occur. And that's why I become the I do it again guy. My life becomes a circle of emotion, react, inventory, amends. Emotion, react, inventory, amends. And I'm going to my sponsor, and it gets to the point where, with a little bit of growth, I'm calling them up, and instead of telling them this person's a jerk or that person's a jerk, the conversation goes like this: Hey, spons, I did it again. I can't believe I did it again. And I'm the I did it again guy.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Mm. And that's the trap that I'm in. And so how does this all work in practical application? What is it that I'm supposed to do? How can I stop being the I did it again guy? How does 6 and 7 really work in my life in a practical way to help, not just help me understand, forgive, and repair yesterday, but how does it help me now in the moment? And that becomes the question. And what comes to mind, and this is kind of funny, and I don't want to be controversial. No, that's not true. I do want to be controversial. I just don't want my controversy to upset anybody, right?
Yeah.
But but so there's a lot of conversation that happens in AA now around our new catchphrase. We get new catchphrases every few years, and our current new catchphrase is emotional sobriety. Right? How are we going to attain emotional sobriety? Right? I'm sure you've heard that,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I've read the Bill W. Essay and all that. Yeah. Yeah.
So here's what's interesting about that essay. And this is um, not really I wouldn't call it a pet peeve of mine. It's it's a thing that I get confused about the conversation about his letter, because it is a great letter, and it does make you think and go, huh, I've got over dependency on other people, and that makes me emotionally unstable, and it's interesting. But here's what Bill didn't do. Bill's a prolific writer. I mean, he wrote hundreds of letters and articles for the Grapevine. He wrote many books. He was a prolific writer. You would think, if that letter was supposed to be the Gettysburg Address for mid and late term sobriety, this letter is the thing that you've been missing all your life. He would have written steps 13 through 24 for guys like me to be able to now have real recovery.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but he didn't.
Yeah.
But he didn't.
Yeah.
In fact, what he writes at the end of that letter, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to misquote it, but something along the lines of course, I'm not bringing you anything new. That's what he says in that letter. He's not saying that this is my new discovery at 15, 18, 20 years sober. He's not saying that oh my gosh, I forgot to mention this in the big book. In fact, the reverse. He's saying there's nothing new here. What he's saying, I believe, is that through continued inventory, through step 10 and 11, I will continue to notice varying degrees. Hopefully, the longer I'm sober, the less I react to the lady's expression on her face in the 15 items or less checkout line at the grocery store. Hopefully, I won't embarrass myself as often in that situation.
Yeah.
Or if my spouse doesn't appear to give me the right expression when I walk through the door, or my boss doesn't seem to appreciate me more, or at the business meeting they seem to argue with my point, and the home group's going to self-destruct. Right. Hopefully I react less and less to these things. But do I notice that what's still driving me, what causes my inability to be emotionally sober, is still the same things: selfishness, dishonesty, self seeking, and fear. And fear is the fuel in the engine, if you'd like. The self centered fear is the thing that drives the resentment, drives the selfishness, drives the dishonesty. and that it's the same problem, uh, perhaps wearing a different mask, or perhaps in varying degrees, or perhaps coming up as a surprise because it went away for a little while. But there is nothing new here. That this is what's driving me. My bad reactions to life are still driven by the same defects of character. And so what then do I do? And I so this is an interesting thought. So in step 10, um, Bill Bill writes in the big book that we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, and fear. Right, and I'm trained, and I believe this is true. I don't mean that this is not true. You just got to bear with me through the thought here. I'm trained to believe that step 10 is really 4 through 9, right? And it kind of is, right? I'm kind of doing an inventory. I'm asking God to remove the defect of character. I'm discussing it with someone else where I need to, and if an amends is required, I'm making the amends. So it is 4 through 9. But here's the difference in that 10-step inventory. It says watch for selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, and fear. In other words, it says go right to it. Now, it's hard to describe this because some people think it's the fourth column. Some people think it's the fifth column. I don't care what column it is in your inventory, but we're going right. We're not continuing to look for the person that upset us, the thing that they did, or the how we were affected, the way we are in step 4. Because hopefully, although we may sometimes need to do that, hopefully we have learned that the problem is the selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, and fear. So for the large part, we can go right. We don't need to do the first 3 columns. We can go right to that, what I call the fifth column, but many people call the fourth column, where we're looking just for the problem. Because in the 12 and 12, and I'm bouncing around here a little bit, but we all know that beautiful quote in step 10 in the 12 and 12, that it's a spiritual axiom. It's always true. It's a spiritual axiom. That anytime we are disturbed, there is something wrong with us. So hopefully, I should have learned that anytime I have an emotional disturbance, right? So anytime and I don't know what the negative is. I'm sure we could come up with it. So I'll say anytime I'm not emotionally sober, right? Anytime I don't have emotional sobriety, anytime I'm again acting like that, you know, 3 to 5 year old stamping my feet and rolling on the floor, having a tantrum, that the problem is with me. Back to the big book, right? Pause when agitated. Well, what's agitated if it's not disturbed? Spiritual action. Anytime I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. Pause when agitated. What do I do in the pause? I go, hey, what is this feeling? This feeling is resentment. This feeling is selfishness. This feeling is dishonesty. I am afraid.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What do I do now? Well, now I have to ask myself. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I
I'm
was just
talking to
gonna.
you, Mike.
No. You can continue. I was just thinking, little old me, right? You know.
Right, exactly. So I find myself in this position where no matter what's going on, and pick your problem du jour, right? My problem du jour is that um, I'm gonna tell a lie here. I'm gonna say despite my best efforts, but I don't think I really had my best efforts. But despite the efforts I was prepared to make, my business unfortunately just failed, and I've had to close my business. And I don't have an income right now. I do have a job. I'm going to start in January. Um, uh, and I'm disturbed. Right? Why am I disturbed? Well, selfishly, I want to have all the money I need to pay my bills and live the lifestyle that I want to live, right? I'm dishonest because I think I probably deserve more money than I do for less work than I should, right? I think that really my career path should start with the 6 lucky lottery numbers is really what I think, right?
Yeah,
And
always.
what I really am is afraid. I'm
Mhm.
afraid that um, I will either have to work too hard and sacrifice. I won't be able to. I do a lot of stuff on the weekends in AA. I won't be able to travel as much as I want to, and I'm afraid of that, right? Because I need an income, and I'll probably have to work weekends. I'm afraid that I won't get to eat at the restaurants that I want to eat at, or drive the car I want to drive, or I have a mortgage on my house. I won't. Right? I'm afraid. Now, how does that come out? That comes out with it can come out with cranky, short behavior, treating people wrongly. It can come out as depression. It can come out as sitting on my couch doing nothing. It can come out in 100 different ways. But hopefully, whether I have to do a longer form inventory or not to identify it, hopefully at 29 years sober, I can pause in my agitation and go, huh, Sheldon, you're being selfish and you're being dishonest. And why? Because you're afraid. Hopefully by now I've learned enough to be able to do that. And so once I've done that, right? I've said, okay, I'm afraid. So now step 6 becomes the question. And it is a question for myself. Am I willing to admit that that's really the problem and the only problem, that it's self-reliance, not God reliance? That the only problem I could ever have, Sandy used to say, and he said it best, where there's only one problem, and that's conscious separation from God, and there's only one solution, and that's conscious contact with God. And Chamberlain said the same thing, right? And that's true. And another way to phrase that is the only problem is self-reliance,
Amen.
and the only solution is God reliance. And that's the question in step 6 is, Sheldon, can you see that your problems are because you are in self-reliance, as in the way that you handle your emotional upheaval, that you are being selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and afraid? And are you willing to say that you not only admit that all of your problems are based on self-centered fear, are you willing to say that God can and will remove them if I ask him?
Yeah. Yeah. Good
And
stuff.
that's the step 6 question, right? So sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. No, I'm not. I don't really believe it. I don't really feel that way. No. And then what does step 6 tell me to do when I'm in resistance? Well, if I'm going to be in AA, and I'm going to do AA, then I just have to ask God to give me that willingness. God, let me see it. I'm not, this isn't me trying to impress my sponsor or the guys at the home group, or, Paul in the interview. This is me with God by myself. Am I willing to say to God, God, I don't really trust you, but I'm willing. Please give me the willingness to be willing to trust you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And when I say yes, then humbly, knowing I can't do it without him, knowing that self reliance can't be the solution and only God reliance can, then I can humbly say to God, take away my defects of character. I'm willing that you have all of me, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Relieve, right? And
Hmm.
and so then step 7 becomes the solution. And
Yeah. I love that. I can relate to every bit of that. You get to a point. I love in the 12 and 12 when 7, I believe it's 7, it's either 6 or 7, where it talks about, and I'm probably going to botch this, but it says something along the lines of humility as once was a force feed, a humble pie, right? And that now is the working ingredient in our or nourishing ingredient in our serenity, right? And
Mhm.
like my experience with that was is like, probably around 6 or 7 years sober, I got to this place where I was like fed up at the end of just fed up with being me, right? Like my personal relationship stuff in my personal life was just unbearable, right? And like I'd done enough inventory at this point, because I'd finally found the big book, started going through the steps out of the book, and it changed my life. But when I got to that unbearable place, I started seeing, after I did a lot of nightly review stuff, where like, dude, this is the best I got. You get what I mean?
Mm.
Like, this is the absolute best I got. And when I got to that space, that's when I really started seeing how much, like, how my, the self reliance is failing me, but yet I'm continuously going to it. And that's where it used to be a force feed a humble pie. Now it's like, it's like a volunteer to, like, all right, God, please take care of this, because I don't, the qualities that my heart desires, I don't necessarily possess. Right? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I don't. I'm like, the if you're, in your early mid 20s or younger, you don't remember this, but those of us that
I'm
are a
42.
little,
Yeah.
so you know Christmas time, right? The gifts come,
Yeah.
and you get the robot or the race car,
Yeah.
and it says on the box, batteries not included.
Yeah.
Right? Lack of power is my dilemma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not that I'm doing something wrong, and if I was a better human, then all of a sudden I'd find the power.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just don't
I
have
don't.
it.
Yeah. Amen.
and and that is humbling
Yeah.
to admit. I remember when I was new, I used to love it when people would say this, and I don't agree with it anymore. They'd say that humble has nothing to do with humiliation. I think it does.
Sure.
I have to be humiliated enough to prove to myself that I don't have what it takes. It's not that I have it. I have the ability to treat people better. I'm just withholding it because I like to be a jerk. I just don't have it. I'm not equipped with compassion. I'm not
Amen.
equipped, right? And but the good news is that everything I don't have, God has with abundance. There's one who has all power. Now, if he has all the power, how much do I have? None. None. But all I have to do is be willing to say I don't have it,
Yeah.
humbly
Mm.
saying I just can't do it. And when I humbly ask him, we feel a new power flow in.
Yeah. Yeah. Rightly
Right?
relating ourselves to the power. Yeah. That's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets a little bit um, uncomfortable for some people. And what I'm about to say may go against some people's fundamental beliefs. And if it goes against anyone listening's fundamental beliefs, I dig it. That means I'm wrong. It really does, right? Because you get to own your beliefs 100%
Nice.
in
Yeah.
AA,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and I'll tell you this, I always like to share this at some point when I do a weekend or a longer talk with people, that I do have a gift. But my gift is a gift of communication. It's not of insight and knowledge. I know that I make the words sound pretty, but it doesn't mean I'm right. So if you disagree with anything that I say, you should, and you should own your own thoughts and feelings, because I'm just the entertainer on the podcast, right? Is all I am. But having said that, this is what I honestly believe. Um, I used to ask God for a better job. Dear God, help me get a better job. And the problem with that is when I do that, I'm making God into an employment agent. I'm demoting him. Or I would play for a better place to live. God, my house is small and drafty and in the wrong neighborhood. Father, please give me a better place to live. And so I just made God a real estate agent. Or God, I'm lonely and I'd really like to be in a wonderful long-term committed relationship. Now I made him a pimp. I
Yeah.
mean, really,
Yeah.
and I don't think God cares where I work. I don't think he cares where I live, and I don't think he cares who I sleep with. I think he cares that in my home, where I live, is love and compassion and kindness. That when I go to work, I'm there to be of service and I do the best job I can, and I give them a dime for their nickel, and that I carry the vision of his will with me. And
Nice.
with my partner, that I treat them like one of his kids, that with his power and his grace, I can treat whoever my partner is with loyalty, kindness, love, compassion. I think God works in the not in the physical realm, but in the spiritual, or if you like, the emotional realm.
Yeah.
That's where his power can have a real effect on me
Yeah.
today,
Yeah. Amen.
now, in this moment.
Hmm. I agree. I agree. I love that. So let me ask you this. Okay. So I love how you talked about carrying the vision of God's will, because that's pretty much the key to it. Now it's like you get to a space where you get unblocked and you realize, like, I don't have what it takes. And then you rightly relate yourself to God, and hopefully you can share his compassion through the day. Right. But like, and this is just my experience. Like, I like what you said. Everyone's allowed to have their own experience, but it seems like that, like working the steps. Obviously living life and having different life experiences, but working the steps through that process, like several times and continuously trying to seek God and rightly relate myself. I had a change of heart to where now it's like, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure I could back up from doing all the spiritual stuff or whatever, rightly relate myself and still be, put myself, I do it all the time, right? Put myself at the center of the universe. But like, I had a change of heart, especially over the last year or so, where like, I want to do, it's like, instead of having him be, my God, being his guy, it's like, I realize that's where my freedom comes, and where I find true peace, and serenity is through, like, trying to have the spirit of service and like wondering what I could do to help. And
Mm.
luckily, I'm grateful, man. My first grand sponsor and my first sponsor, and my current sponsor don't have to do it so much because I was just taught early on. But like, they always used to beat down my head. How many guys you working with, Paul? How many guys you working with? So I was taught early on to sponsorship, sponsor. So I always worked with a lot of guys.
Mhm.
And like, at the time in the beginning, I didn't really understand. Now I'm like, wow, like, thank God they pushed me towards sponsorship, right? So like,
Mhm.
what about, like, the change of heart is what I like calling it, that happens to where it's like, it ain't all about me anymore, and like, we're wondering what we can make, what kind of contribution we can make to life. What's your experience in that shift? For lack of a better term, that happened. And how long had you been in sobriety before that kind of started really taking place?
Well, I wish that I could tell you that that shift took place in a way where it was a permanent shift. I think sometimes we do a couple of different disservices sometimes when we're communicating in AA. And one of the disservices that we do is that we pretend that we've outgrown our humanness. Like a guy will come to us with a problem, and our answer is, "Well, 3 years ago I used to feel that way."
Yeah, yeah,
And if you keep doing what we do in AA, you'll outgrow that too. And I think it's a weird kind of spiritual arrogance where we're trying to make ourselves look a certain way. 3 weeks ago, I had to call the receptionist back at my dentist's office because I yelled at her so much when the work they were doing on my teeth didn't go the way it was planned. So much so I couldn't get her on the phone, and I had to drive over there and ask to talk to her because I was a big jerk.
mm,
And that's 3 weeks ago.
yeah,
So I don't believe that there has been a transformation in me where all of a sudden now I float a couple of feet off the ground, and when I die, you guys will have to build a statue to me in front of your local treatment center where you can leave your chip on
yeah,
the
yeah,
pedestal
yeah,
as you leave, because
yeah,
all of a sudden I don't make mistakes anymore. In fact, if you run into a guy in AA that says he used to be like that and he isn't anymore, stay away from him, because if he'll lie to you about that, he'll lie to you about everything.
yeah,
I mean, we are still driven by 100 forms, but it happens less often.
yeah, yeah,
And what the change of heart is now is that later, a few hours or a few days later, if I'm still churning about what a jerk someone is, there is definitely a reaction that goes, "Hey, wait a minute, Sheldon, you're out of line." And that's where this step 10 or 11 comes into play, where, because we go back to this idea in step 6 where I pause when agitated. I notice that I'm behaving badly, and I'm looking for if it's selfish, dishonest, right? That occurs. Sometimes that occurs in the moment, Sometimes it occurs after I've behaved badly. Sometimes that pause happens 2 weeks later. And sometimes I'm still mad at a guy and I've had to do a whole nother I call my sponsor and go, look, I can't get over, what Billy did. And we need to do some inventory for when to create that pause. But when that pause happens, right, the change of heart is that I know that it was me. My first sponsor used to say that when there's a problem in my life, at some point, like from that TV show, the CSI team comes in, to get the hair follicles and the fingerprints and the saliva and the blood. And when they take all the evidence back to the crime lab, the DNA always comes back as mine.
Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this brings up another important point. When I was new, I got the feeling that the old timers were telling me that anytime that anything happened, that the other person was always right and I was always wrong.
Mm.
They're always stupid. They're always great and I'm always stupid. And that's not what our literature says at all, right? And if that's because if that's the case, right? I'm a smart guy. I know that other people they've done things too. And I don't like this idea of looking for my part, right? We'll come back to that in a minute.
Yeah.
But the big book does say this. It says the world and its people are often quite wrong. They are. The world and its people are often quite wrong. It never corrects that statement.
Yeah.
Now, it does say that that's as far as any of us ever got. And if we stay there, we're going to stay sick, right? But it is true that in my childhood, my mom was not a perfect mother. My dad was not a perfect mother. My boss makes mistakes. My spouse other people make mistakes. Now the reason we don't say my part, and I hate my part, is because if you take a whole thing and then you break off a part, obviously the part is small compared to the whole thing. So anytime I'm talking about my part, I'm minimizing what I did, and I'm right. I'm not. So, but we don't look at parts. What we do is the book says further on, putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done. They did do wrongs. Yes, they did. Now put that out of your mind. And we resolutely, and that's a strong way to look at something. We resolutely, with resolve, look for our own mistakes. So it's not that the world is perfect and I'm a jerk. It's that the world is the world and life is life. And just like I make mistakes, you make mistakes. But I'm gonna voice your mistake, say you were wrong, and then put it out of my mind and look for what I could have done differently. And oftentimes, what I could have done differently is I could have been more selfless. I could have been more forthright. I could have been less terrified and more in faith. Right. And that's the goal here is that as I go through my life, I'm not trying to always say that they're right and I'm wrong. What I am trying to say is that it's okay that others make mistakes. It's okay. We're human. I'm not trying to outgrow my humanness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to survive it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
allowing watching it and allowing it to be as it when it comes, and not beating yourself up. And I completely agree. Like when I say change your heart, here's what I mean. Like was like the first several years of my sobriety, even like the first or second inventory I did, where I started seeing some of these truths. Right, I was like, yeah, I get it. But I'm the issue, but screw them, right? That was like that for quite a while, right? And then, but there was like
Yeah.
a change of heart, and I'm not saying it's always like that, but like a desire to seek and do God's will. Over the last, and obviously, I'm unconscious in a lot of different areas at times. I get it going off on people, especially like you put me in a work environment. Like it's real easy to get like just full of me and things not going my way. That's probably the easiest way for me to lose it. Traffic not so much. Work environment, kind of pretty much, right?
Yeah.
We all have our own little quirks, but like, um, but yeah, like but over the last couple years, there was something happened. I think because I never really considered, like you touched on it, the carrying a vision of God's will in all my activities,
Mhm.
right? I never really considered that for several years in my recovery. Like I kind of used, I got deep into certain meditations, like for the first few years of my sobriety, right? And I didn't
Yeah.
even do a lot of step work at that time, but I was using meditation as like a self-seeking, self-centered thing, right? To
Mm.
help, I'm gonna feel better. You know what I mean? I'm gonna feel better.
Yeah.
It's all about me and my feelings and my internal state and yada yada
Mhm.
yada. And yet I was like, so I would use God, at that particular time in my life as like a feel good. I never really considered like putting his, wonder what he would have me be in this situation. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, absolutely, and that is what we're talking about in 6 and 7 and in the fear inventory, like as you quote from there, where the direct our thinking to what he would have us be. Absolutely, I mean, you know, uh, one of the things that I think, I mentioned before that there's a couple of things we do in the fellowship where we do a disservice sometimes in meetings, and the first one was where I said we're trying to outgrow our humanness and we act like we've become pure. But the other side of the same coin is when people share that, well, what do you expect of me? I'm just a sick alcoholic. I've always been sick. I'll always be sick. And when someone says that, honestly, I want to say to them, what do I expect of you?
Yeah.
I expect you to get a sponsor, get a home group, work the steps, and have a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
We do not claim spiritual perfection, but we do claim progress. Our imperfection, if you like, our the spirituality of imperfection, as Ernie Cooch wrote about. It's this brokenness that forces me to search for God, and that's kind of beautiful. That I don't get rendered perfect, because I don't know about you, but if God made me perfect, then I would tip my hat to him and say, thanks for the help, Pops. I got it from here. But because I'm not perfect, because I still need him, because I still make mistakes, because I still get afraid, I am driven back into his arms, which is almost a gift on its own.
Yeah.
So
It's good stuff.
I
Yeah.
I'll give you some, uh, kind of a thought here that I shared this with you a little bit um, before the podcast, but it's where my mind is at now in this area. You can go to a book study or a discussion meeting, and you can bring up 6 and 7, and someone's bound to say something like, "Well, there's not much to 6 and 7. I mean, geez, Bill wrote one paragraph on 6, and then the prayer for 7, and there's not much in the book about it, and they're kind of the nothing burger steps of AA, right? But I look at that completely different. I think the reason that there's only one paragraph on step 6 in the big book and then the prayer in step 7, I think the a reason, I don't pretend to know Bill's mind, but I think a reason for that could conceivably be that there was nothing left to say. The whole book is about 6 and 7. That's what we do in AA. Everything we do in AA is about our 6 and 7 journey. In step 1, I admit that I have a problem that I cannot tackle on my own. I can't drink the way I want to, and I can't live the way I want to, and there's got to be a solution for that somewhere. And in step 2, I say that I am willing to seek to have a step 6 and 7 experience. And in step 3, I make a decision to go look for a 6 and 7 experience. And in 4 and 5, I inventory and talk about what my life looks like when I don't have a 6 and 7 experience. In 8 and 9, I clean up the mess I made by not having a 6 and 7 experience. And in 10 and 11, I continuously check myself to make sure I'm having a 6 and 7 experience. And in step 12, I look for a guy who I can help have his own 6 and 7 experience. That it is everything we do here. And the better I can get at being willing to have God remove from me the emotional distress that self creates and allow me to be more reliant on Him and less reliant on myself, the better experience I can have in sobriety and in Alcoholics Anonymous,
Amen.
and by extension in the world.
Amen. Yeah, that's so true, man. It's like what I was saying earlier. Like I'd gotten to that point, and it's funny because I'd gotten to this point, but then it's fleeting, But like I got to the point where I was just so freaking tired of being me, and just the heartache and stuff that came along with it.
Sure.
I called it. To be honest with you, I called it like untreated alcoholism. I was 4 or 5 years sober, and running everything into the ground. It's funny because when you had mentioned that you went to your sponsor and your sponsor said, you just experienced that Sheldon can't manage his own life. That was like perfect for my experience back then. Yeah, and still this day I get to see where I'm putting myself at the center of the universe. Why ain't things adding up to what I want them to be? So on, so on. It's all self-centered fear. I completely agree with that, right? And I'll tell you, like, that's the cool part. Like, inventory is so important for me, like doing nightly review and stuff like that, because, like, I say this all the time, but it's true. Is like, I wonder, like, what's not objectionable to me right now, but probably should be. So, you ever wonder that? Like, wonder what's not objectionable in my life, but I should probably find it objectionable. Like, also another thing is I'm a pretty sensitive person, right? I can make a comment to someone and like it eat at me a certain way, but yet I know other people that aren't as sensitive and they can like throw little jabs left and right, and it's like it never affects them, right? And like so, I'm always like wondering like, if I said something like that, it would freaking eat me alive, right? Because I'm super sensitive about certain stuff. So I'm often wondering, having little experiences like that, like, is there stuff that I'm doing, saying, little acts that I'm doing throughout the day, whether it's at home or work or whatever, that I'm not finding objectionable? But, I probably will sooner or later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe, and maybe not. I mean, we all have slightly different personalities, and maybe what should be objectionable isn't things you're saying, but the judgment you have of the people that are saying them.
Sure. Absolutely. I
You
think
know,
that too,
and
yeah.
I don't have to worry about things that are not objectionable to me. I have to worry about things that are objectionable, but that I can justify.
Gotcha.
That's where the problem
Mm.
is that I know I shouldn't behave this way, but I have a great excuse.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's where it's problematic, and so I don't know. It's a journey, and the road does narrow, and things do change for us, um, um, and like Bill talks about in the 12 and 12, in 6 and 7, where you know the things that I look at today that I want God to take from me that cause me problems. Um, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 29 years ago, boy, this was a goal. I hoped I could live like this. But as we get better, right, we have to continue to look for um, uh, less and less infractions, but that are still infractions, that are still manifestations of self. And that's the goal of inventory. But I do believe that, boy, and this is not. Um, Let me make sure I explain this right so I don't get the wrong impression of somebody and upset them. But you can over inventory. You can, excessive inventory without taking that now into prayer meditation and asking God to remove that without the 6 and 7 component is just scribbling. It's you know it, this will sound weird, and someone's going to crash their car right when I say this, right? But what does inventory give me? other than self knowledge.
Yeah.
That's all it provides. And self knowledge avails me nothing. What do I do with that self knowledge?
Yeah.
And what do I do with that self knowledge is I ask myself honestly, am I willing? Do I trust God enough that I don't need to use that broken defense mechanism anymore? Do I trust God enough that I don't need to be self reliant? And in step 7, I can ask Him to make me God reliant.
Yeah. That's good stuff. Yeah. I tell you, so here was with me. Like, yeah, the inventory it doesn't fix it, but here's the thing: like when I talk about objectionable and not objectionable, was that first 3 or 4 years of my sobriety. That I mean, I was running all over like people in my personal life, right, and
Sure.
had no clue, right.
Mm.
And it wasn't until like I was probably a few years sober, I did an inventory, and I was like, holy crap, where I finally seen the truth, right? Like that's the reason I'm saying like the things that aren't objectionable in my life that possibly should be, because I was doing a lot of stuff for years that was not objectionable to me. I thought I was like, I'm doing it for this reason or that reason, but I hadn't really done the inventory process. I didn't see it like I finally seen it at a few years sober, to where like there was a lot of stuff in my life that was not objectionable to me, but definitely should have been. You know,
So let me ask you a question that just for the sake of giggles here. How long are you sober?
8 years. Next month will be 9. Yeah,
Well, so 8 years because we don't
yeah,
give any
yeah,
fronts,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So I will tell you my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, when I was 1 year sober, I would have told you I'm really glad I'm sober because I was such a mess when I came in, and now I'm doing much better. And the cure for being 1 year sober was turning two. Because when I turned two, I went, oh my God, I can't believe I was such a mess at one. And now I'm two. I'm so grateful to God and AA for the growth I've had. And at five, I look back at two thinking I was dumb.
Yeah,
Well, I'm going to tell you, Paul, the cure for being 8 years sober will be turning nine. And when you look back at nine from 15, you will see yourself and go, oh my God, I'm 29. I'm convinced the cure for being 29 will be turning 30. I mean, that's just hindsight is 2020, and you'll play that game for the rest of your life
yeah.
because growth is slow.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Thank God, right? I
Mm,
cease to be unexcited about any of this. Thank God. I've always had new experiences. I've always
mm.
been excited about recovery since about 90 days in, anyways. And
Yeah, we're lucky. I think that the people that get to have a good life in AA are the people that force themselves to find a way to get on fire about AA. And the way that I think one of the ways that you have to do that, uh, a dear friend of mine, and I know Bob Bazant. I'm gonna quote him, Bob. If you hear this, I'm gonna do you an injustice probably by quoting you wrong. But he says this thing where he says we bring our damp log to the bonfire of AA, right? And so what you got to do is if you're new, if you're listening to this and you're new, or if you're not new and you've been sober a while, but AA is kind of flat, you got to look around. Not that the people you're hanging out with are problematic, but you got to look around and say, hey, the people I'm running with, are they going to a bunch of meetings, looking for newcomers, reading the book, doing 12-step work? Are they involved in the committees? Do they have commitments? Do they look like they're on fire for AA? And if not, go find those people because excitement is catchy. That's why when you're at the football stadium, you cheer louder than you do when you're in your living room. So you got to go find your exciting people in AA doing exciting things so you can go be excited with them and find joy
yeah,
in your recovery.
yeah,
And if you do that, boy, it's you bring your damp log to the bonfire
nice.
and the bonfire dries out the log and
Mm,
eventually your log catches fire so you can dry out the next log that shows up.
Very good. That's awesome. Yeah. Pockets of enthusiasm, right?
Pockets of enthusiasm. That's exactly right.
That's awesome. Man, thank you so much, Sheldon.
My friend, I
This
hope this was fun and
was.
enjoyable, and I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, man, you did freaking awesome. Thank you so much. I'd like to we'll stay in touch, and I'll want to possibly after the beginning of the year, maybe like a few months, maybe April or something, set another date, do some more stuff.
Yeah, I do want you to know that I gave you my very best stuff this time, and so anything else will be.
No.
Will go. I
Would you
shot
say?
my wild.
Would you say in 30 years will be? Would you say by then you might be 30, right?
Yeah, in July I'll be 30, so
We'll wait till
I'll know the
July.
real answers after July 17th. I'll by that I'll go, oh my God,
Yeah.
burn that podcast. We got to do it again.
Yeah, that's
I was
funny.
so sick back then.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much.
All right, my friend. Have a great night. Thank you so much for the invite and allow me to do this with you.
Appreciate it, Sheldon. Have a good night.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.